is additional problem because they think they mix up very often criminology with criminalistics, for example. And they think that they will be, doing things related to investigation, fingerprints, DNA analysis, and such things. No, it's not what is criminology about, and this creates additional problems very often. That young people who start such studies do not know really what they are going to study at those universities or high schools. So it is, if you go to study engineering or even law, you usually know what you are going to study. But in case of criminology, it is often not so clear.
Yeah. And another indicator sometimes of the institutionalization of the discipline is the journals, and you have these archives of criminology in Poland. I'm a member of the editorial board.
Yeah. So it is really the well, let me put it this way: it is the only one exclusively criminological journal in Poland. This is the first one. Second, it has tradition because it's under slightly different title. It appeared already before World War II. There were 4 volumes were published before 1939, including 2 of them contain very large and very important studies of statistical data on crime by Leon Radzinovich. So because before he left to UK, he was quite active in publishing and doing criminological research in Polish in Poland. So archives of criminology were suspended during the 1950s because the communists considered criminology to be a, let's say, imperialist type of science, bourgeois science, and therefore they banned criminological research and all institutional forms of criminology. It returned after 1956, and primarily in Warsaw. And at the Academy of Science, they recreated because before the war it was Archiwum Kryminologiczne, which means criminological archives, and they reinstituted it as archives of criminology. And since that time, it was a yearbook, and only 3 years or 4 years ago, it appears every half a year. So there are 2 volumes a year, and what they did, this is Witold Klaus, who is now editor-in chief, that they try also to be much more international, let's say, and to publish primarily in English. At least a couple of articles in each volume are in English, and it is, let's say, decent English, because they have people who do copy editing, native speakers who do copy editing for them, and they do it very competently. So there are even some issues which were completely in English, and well, I would say that probably the original idea was to make archives of criminology some sort of journal for Central European criminology. But now I think they go beyond this, because certainly there are also things, especially special issues, which they publish, which are well, not only European, truly European, but even global sometimes. So it is, I think, quite good thing, and there. Well, the direction they have taken a couple of years ago is absolutely well. It's good and it works. Let's say it is probably the only one such journal in Central Europe which is above the purely national level and impact. Otherwise, there was an attempt by colleagues from Gdańsk to start exclusively English language journal. It was called Polish Journal of Criminology. And it was supposed to be, I think, published 4 times a year, like many journals. But I think they ran out of money. They had some sort of grant from the research ministry, but it was enough for 3 years only, I think. They haven't received any more financial support, and as far as I know, since 4 years or something like this, this journal is not appearing, let's say. Yeah. Otherwise, there are, of course, various journals which do and publish things criminological, but they are, well, interdisciplinary journals related to legal, primarily some legal things, and usually they don't publish in other languages. They do publish only in Polish. So that's current situation. There is also one strange thing which is extremely frustrating, not only for criminologists but also for all researchers in this country, but for researchers in social science, law, and relevant areas, it is primarily something very, very frustrating. We have, namely, what is probably known everywhere in Europe and in the world, that for publishing, the journals are assessed what regards the quality, etc., and you receive for publishing in a journal a certain amount of credits, let's say, the researcher, the scholar. And up till 2015, there was a special independent committee within the research ministry. They were reviewing every couple of years the journals and assigning those credits in more or less independent and, let's say, reasonable, objective way. Since 2015, as you may know, I do not want to be too much political, but nevertheless, we have some political problems in Poland, and current government or current research ministry did things absolutely appalling, because they assign now those credits to journals absolutely at will. There are no clear criteria, no clear procedures, it's not transparent, and therefore, to give you just example, there are 2 journals which are more or less related or connected to the Ministry of Justice. In one of them, the Minister of Justice is even head of editorial board. Especially one of those journals used to be quite reasonable up till 2015. But now, for one of them is devoted to penitentiary problems and prison law and such things. Now, who publishes in this journal? Practically only people working in prison administration. And you receive for the article published in this journal 100 credits. Says nothing at the moment to you. There is also other journal published by the Ministry of Justice, which for which you receive also 100 credits. Archives of Criminology. For Archives of Criminology, you receive 70 credits. There is also such a journal, State and Law. It is published by the Academy of Science. It's certainly the best legal journal in Poland, with enormous tradition, very good, high quality, etc., etc. For publishing in this journal, you receive also 70 credits. So poor quality journals, for political reasons, are graded much higher than really established high quality traditional journals. And this is something extremely frustrating. Under current conditions, there is no way to change this. The most troublesome aspect of this is that it is what some people from current government admit, that this is an attempt to corrupt young people and to send texts to those journals, because for me it doesn't matter whether I publish there or there, but for young people it is very important, because it has impact on how they are evaluated by their employers. And if you do this exclusively in those quantitative terms of number of credits you have collected during a year or two, it is obvious that for young people, it is understandable that they attempt to publish in those highly valued in terms of credits journals, which are not necessarily really good journals. And it is also, the problem is that it is very often much easier to get texts accepted in those journals than, let's say, in Archives of Criminology or other journals. Because probably these journals also have a certain line, a certain editorial line. No, well, I wouldn't say that. Well, that probably, in case you send something very critical about current things going on within criminal justice system, rule of law, etc., in Poland, you may risk not having it accepted, you know. While in Archives of Criminology or in State and Law on few other journals, such things doesn't matter, because it's quality what counts and not political stance, let's say. Yeah, I have to ask you this because, yeah, it seems quite incredible in the 21st century to be in this situation and to have governments that take autocratic positions in Europe. Do you think that the people that are publishing in this in Archives of Criminology, or the people that are critical to the regime, the risks they are incurring currently? Well, I would say at the moment, no, probably, especially if you are, let's say, at big, respectable, established university.
Personally, I didn't expect that there would be this kind of research under the communist regime in the 1950s and 60s, because in many other communist regimes, for example, in Eastern Germany, it was only the Marxist school that was taught at universities. So you talk about more traditional criminological research on the correlates of offending, which is quite special. I mean, in this kind of context, where people were working under the Soviet regime, just to say, I mean, it's...
No, well, to be honest, the first thing that, as I said, there were leftovers of pre-war criminology in Poland. So there were people who were educated in normal conditions and were able to conduct normal research, etc. That was the first factor. And they remained in country. They did not emigrate like it was the case in some other Central and Eastern European countries. That was the first factor. Second factor was that Poland, compared with Eastern Germany, was a different world with regards, freedom of research, freedom of thought, etc. Of course, it was a communist authoritarian country, but still there were some niches, for some people at least, where they were able to do things they wanted. They had probably no practical impact whatsoever. But in terms of research, they were more or less free and able to do decent and reasonable things. And this was probably the case with Batavia and this Warsaw, let's say, circle of criminologists who were very often also regime critical, but still they were somehow tolerated. They could have sometimes troubles, problems, etc. For example, one example is interesting. He was a pupil of Batavia to a certain extent, Professor Jerzy Jasiński, the late Jerzy Jasiński, who was in Warsaw. And during the 1960s, it is a very good and very interesting study regarding comparative punitiveness of criminal justice systems in Europe, where, of course, getting data from Western Europe was no problem for him at that time. The trick was to find something about countries of Central and Eastern Europe. And he used various private contacts to obtain from some people from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Eastern Germany, some data on imprisonment, incarceration rate, prison population, and such things. That prepared really excellent study comparing primarily Polish, because here the data were available without too much problems, other Central and Eastern European countries, and Western Europe. And of course, result was obvious, but it was proven that Central and Eastern Europe or communist countries are unbelievably punitive with regards crime control policies. And it was a very, very large article he prepared, and censorship, which existed at that time, prohibited to publish it. It took, I think, 2 years for this ban to be lifted, but finally they succeeded. And the article was published without practically any changes, So that illustrates certain things, that you could have problems, you could have trouble, including censorship interventions and such things unthinkable for any other normal country. But still, on many occasions, if you were persistent, you could finally succeed with doing something. Of course, this text had no practical impact whatsoever because communist authorities were not impressed by those results. But nevertheless, we have at least a very good quality documentation of certain things which were going on at that time.
Thank you for following Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology Podcast, a podcast hosted by Marcelo Aebi from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, and Lieven Pauwels from Ghent University, Belgium. We aim to draw a map of the state of criminology across Europe through the words of contemporary criminologists. How is criminology defined and taught? Which are the main lines of research? Which are the main schools of thought in each country? These and many other questions are answered here by fellow researchers who share their vision on the development of criminology in their countries from its beginnings to the second decade of the 21st century. If you want to know and compare their stories, stay tuned. This podcast is edited by Eduardo Coco from the University of Lausanne. Our theme song is Seagull's Night, Noche de Gaviotas, composed by Gustavo Cantero, arranged by Tato Germano, and played by Tato and Gustavo with the voices of Sasha Conte and Alejandro Turco Guyot. Cheers, and see you soon.